handlers take their positions in the hangar or flight deck. The ship is cleared for action. Every sailor and Marine awaits the enemy strike.
The Japanese, however, are aware that they have done some damage to the American force, and they come gunning for the Chicago.
Enterprise immediately launches more Wildcats to meet the Japanese threat. 60 miles out, the twin-engine bombers race towards the American task force. Now, Enterprise's crew relies on their first line of defense, the fighter squadron nicknamed the Grim Reapers. One of them is Don Flash Gordon, a gritty veteran of Santa Cruz.
I tally-hoed 11 Bettys, twin-engine torpedo planes. They were at 1 o'clock again, and they're really fast. They were going to cut behind us, so we made a hard turn to the port. We ended up a little bit behind them.
With Gordon in the lead, the Grim Reapers maneuver into position, ready to defend the fleet, or die trying.
We stayed on their right side and tried to get ahead of them in case they wanted to go to the Enterprise instead of Chicago.
Gordon and the Reaper Wildcats close the distance between the enemy planes as the Japanese flyers race toward the Chicago.
There was a formation of 6 in an echelon, the lead echelon, and 5 in the second.
As the Bettys storm over the task group, the Wildcats bear down with withering .50 caliber firepower.
I burned that lead airplane and it fell out of formation, and the second one was burning and it was falling out.
Gordon and the pilots of Fighting Squadron 10 hammer the enemy airstrike.
Our planes did a very, very good job and practically wiped out that enemy fleet of planes.
But somehow, 4 Bettys survive the Grim Reapers and release their warheads on USS Chicago. At the last possible moment, Navajo tries to turn Chicago to face the enemy and make her a smaller target. But just as Navajo pulls the cruiser head-on with the enemy, the fearsome torpedoes pound into Chicago's hull and detonate in a horrendous blast. The Big East pilots are quick to defend their comrades. Gordon and his fellow aces sweep in and pour hot lead into the enemy strike force. 9 enemy planes are blasted into the afterlife. Only 2 will survive their encounter with Enterprise.
One went east and one went southeast. And the nearest one was going east, and I down on the water, and so I got on the water and raised my nose to fire at him. I'm sure I had full throttle on, but I wasn't catching him.
But the damage is done. Back on USS Chicago, her survivors abandon ship and can only stand by and watch the bitter end. Below decks, seawater pours through the torpedo holes, rushes over bulkheads, and fills compartments, one after another. From her lower holds and engine rooms to the storage areas, magazines, and passageways, Chicago is soon completely flooded. As she takes on more weight, she slowly starts to roll to her starboard side. Topside, Chicago has one final honor. As flames from the torpedo blast rage on, the heat reaches the powder supply for the 5-inch guns. On her own, with her battle colors still waving in the breeze, Chicago fires off one ghostly salute to her sailors. Then, her heavy superstructure pulls her right over on her side, and Chicago quickly slips beneath the waves. The whole sinking takes only 19 minutes. For 62 American sailors, this ship is their final resting place.
Chicago is then the last large American warship that's lost during the Guadalcanal fight.
It was one of our favorite heavy cruisers.
The loss of the heavy cruiser she was sent to protect is a terrible blow to the Big E. Enterprise simply isn't used to failure. But, though the Chicago was lost, the troop transports she had sailed to defend still deliver their Marines ashore at Guadalcanal. In 6 months of combat, the U.S. has suffered over 7,000 casualties, 29 ships lost, and 600 aircraft shot down. But the Japanese have lost nearly 30,000 men, 38 ships, and as many as 800 aircraft. A U.S. victory at Guadalcanal is undeniable. Now, the U.S. has a major toehold in the South Pacific and an important airbase to launch strategic missions against the enemy. The life and death ordeal at Guadalcanal is finally over. Mission accomplished. By 1943, not a single surviving American warship has seen as much combat in the Pacific as USS Enterprise, from Pearl Harbor to Midway. From the Marshall Islands to the Solomon Sea, nearly a dozen battles and thousands of sea miles, a score of Imperial ships sent to a watery grave.
We were on the best ship in the Navy. It was going to take care of whatever needed to be taken care of. There was no question but what we were going to pull out of there with a victory.
Enterprise has already seen almost every major naval battle of the war and has beaten the odds. Now she can finally rest. Her crew will get much-deserved R&R at Espiritu Santos. As Enterprise makes her way into the island base, a batch of young officers fresh from midshipman school arrive for assignment. One of them is Oregon native and gunnery officer Ken Peck. Peck and a handful of other officers have just completed a long journey across the Pacific for a rendezvous with Enterprise.
It was the first aircraft carrier, I guess, that I ever saw. And boy, we were excited. We could see it from a distance. And it was a beautiful, big old gray ghost.
For Peck and hundreds of other sailors, his first glimpse of Enterprise is love at first sight.
It's so big, it looks so strong, and the goose pimple just run up and down my back, and they welcomed us aboard and signed us in and told us where we were going to sleep that night. And that's how I came to the Enterprise.
To carriers like USS Enterprise, Espiritu Santos offers a safe harbor where ships can be refueled and supplied with ammo and reinforcements.
These fleet operating bases gave us a base far enough from action to where they could not be directly threatened by Japanese airplanes, by Japanese ships. And they gave us a place where we could send ships back to refit and resupply. It gave us an area where we could bring in new troops that could then ultimately be deployed into combat. It gave us the lifeline that we needed to the rear echelon areas.
For a veteran campaigner, Espiritu offers cold beer, outdoor movies, and needed relief from the rigors of war.
When the ship would tie up in Espiritu Santos, we'd go ashore to work on the planes. We'd work on half a day, and then we'd knock off and go swimming.
For myself, sometimes R&R was a shower and a hot meal. It frees up your mind, clears your head, and it kind of prepares you to go back and continue on the fight. And when you go to shore and you finally get to relax, you get to data dump things, which means that you get to block it out, forget about it, and carry on, and that helps you enormously.
For Enterprise veteran Roy Blood from Maine and his buddy Charlie Mason, R&R and Espiritu also offers a bit of adventure. One night, Blood and Mason bum a ride in a Jeep with two pistol-packing Marines.
And the Marines are driving along with the headlights, of course, on this dirt road, speeding along. And all of a sudden, they drag to a stop, and wham, wham, they fire their 45s at something. And I thought, God, the Japs are here.
Suddenly, the enemy reveals itself.
These huge, giant land crabs were coming across the road, migrating, and the Marines were objecting, knocking them off left and right.